What's a local legend or horror story in your town everyone collectively believes or tells? It's Em. I hope you enjoyed today's video and have a great rest of your day. Story 1. Our local dam, which is the second biggest in the country, has mutant catfish in it. It was built in the 80s with the intention to supply nearby fields with water, but due to some complications, it never reached its intended goal. Anyways, on the bottom of the dam there are 2 villages, and the people from it were forced to move to nearby towns or villages in order for the dam to be built. The only thing that is not entirely engulfed by the water is the church of one of the villages, Zovjesti, which is the birthplace of my grandma. And the icons are gone. Everything. The only eerie and creepy thing staying is a highly erased but still recognizable mural of Satan. Some people believe that this is a reminder of the buried lives, stories, and memories at the bottom of the dam. The other thing about the dam is that many people believe that there are mutant monster catfish lurking in the depths. I'm not sure about this statement, but I do believe that there was some kind of chemical or substance leak from a nearby mine, which essentially contaminated the water with arsenic, and thus the mutations happened. So a local story that my father told me is that a person drowned and divers were sent to find the body. When they got out of the water, they were speechless and in panic. Now the scary thing is that the hair of one of them partially turned white from fear, and the lips of the other one were pale white. When confronted about what happened, they only said they saw a freaking huge catfish, over 4 to 5 meters, lurking in the deep. The interesting fact is that in 2016, a local fisherman actually caught a freaking 2-meter catfish that was bigger than a human. So yeah, there definitely are big freaking fish down there. But no one dares to go and dive after the story with the divers. Another story that I've heard is from other divers that do it as a hobby, who dived and were terrified at the view. A nearly pitch-black environment, only their flashlights, or the things divers use to bring light into the darkness. And the lights, they had actually revealed a scary scene. Huge patches of forest, abandoned machinery, remains of houses, and even a graveyard. Safe to say they noped the frick out of the waters. The final thing, which is not so scary, but definitely catastrophic if it happens. The dam is located above the town, and the wall supporting it is not maintained regularly. There are many reports about the surrounding land and rocks that state that the wall may crack if not renovated. If this happens, the whole town will be flooded, and possibly wiped out because of the sheer size of the dam. I can only imagine what would happen. So yeah, if you are interested, there are other creepy stories and legends about the town that I can tell you about. Somebody commented, I'd like to hear your stories. I feel like that catfish story could probably be explained by possible radiation. Think the fish from the Lorax where they started to get all weird. But hey, maybe the water actually is haunted. Story 2. Native West Texas, La Llorona, El Chupacabra, and aliens are very real to us. El Chupacabra is usually blamed for livestock deaths, sheep and ghosts on small ranches. People will buzz about it for a day or two and it'll be over. No offense to sheep, but they're dumb enough to accidentally kill themselves, and I don't think they need much help. La Llorona wasn't part of my collective conscious until I was older. But people keeping their kids away from rivers was very common in my area, though absolutely with good reason, because water quality and flash flooding made it sketchy at best. Aliens? Now that's the one I'm more willing to believe. West Texas is extremely empty, in case you've never been. So you see strange lights in some of the darkest and most isolated parts of the country. That's weird. That's worth suspicion. One very localized one was told to me by my Spanish teacher in high school. The ghost motel up one of the highways outside town. It looked like a 50s drive-in motel, and when he first moved here, it was open. People were there, lights were on. And he stopped and talked to the desk clerk asking for directions. When he got into town, allegedly he mentioned it to his neighbor, and they told him the place had been closed for 30 years. He drove back, and sure enough, it was boarded up, abandoned, and in awful shape. People made a habit of going out there on dares, and there have been a few weird stories, but I'm suspicious of the merit to them. I've heard of all of these, and they all seem pretty explainable to me, but I can understand why the town tries to keep the story alive. A big part of it is the local culture, but I do think that some of them have real-life implications, especially La Llorona. I feel like that one is just a good practice of having young kids not by the water alone, where they could get hurt. Story 3. So the high school I went to has a trailer with a crawl space under it that is on a hill. So if you go under it from the front and go as far as you can, you'll eventually hit the hill. When I was in high school, there was a story about a freshman who wanted to go under there to smoke, and the kid disappeared. They never found his body, and they thought it was because of a hobo or drug head who ate him. That scared them, and I guess they told their parents or someone at school about it, and the cops came and brought a canine unit to investigate, because apparently there was a missing kid from the school. I wasn't aware. Obviously, they didn't find anything, but my nephew goes to that school now, 6 years later. And the seniors still tell the freshmen about the cannibal hobo under the trailer. Guess my story was just feasible enough to stick. Either that or it's just an urban legend that'll probably stick for years to come. My school's was a lot dumber. We just used to tell all the freshmen that we had a pool on the 3rd floor. Shocker, if you couldn't guess, we didn't even have a 3rd floor. Story 4. We just had these random weird guys. Mental, not on the good side, so to say. There was the Rainmaker man who would stand on random fields for hours and run toward random people, screaming if they came near. He would always do some weird dances and prayer crap, and every day be at another village. That is why he was called the Rainmaker. The other guy was some boy. He was 19 years old, last I heard of him, who'd always chase children, and some adults, while having a knife in hand. He carved some figures with that knife and wanted to show off his figures, but he'd always have his knife in the other hand. So he would wait at the bus stop and children get out. They freak out at a guy running with a knife at them and run away, and he runs after them. Both were not dangerous, just creepy AF. Story 5. There's one road in the town I was born in that's supposedly one of the most haunted places in New Jersey. It's called Clinton Road, and it's a really long stretch with all forest on one side and a lake on the other, with no fence in between or streetlights. People have reported seeing headlights behind them, they're turning around and there's no car there. Seeing phantom hitchhikers. My favorite story, though, is that there's the ghost of a little boy there that will throw your coins back into the road if you toss them into the lake. One time when my brother and I were little, we threw a coin into the lake to see if it would happen, and my dad noticed. So he slyly threw another one out of the window and into the street. We figured it out eventually, but he scared the crap out of us, LMFAO. Someone commented, upvote for troll dad. I always love a good trolling dad. Parents always help to keep the magic alive, even if it means scaring their kids a little bit. I should ask my friend about this and see if he knows about this one, or if it's just central to OP's town. Story 6. They say that if you stayed late at a bar close to the abandoned part of the city, you would notice the figure of a very sexy girl trying to make you follow her. She doesn't turn around nor speak at any time and is wearing a veil covering her face. You would feel like hypnotized by her perfume and her hips, making you follow her to the most dark part. When you reach a very old and creaky house, she would turn around and reveal her face. And then, suddenly her smell becomes the one of rotten meat, and her face would be one full of worm skull. If you run away, you'd be safe. But if she gets to kiss you, you would instantly die, and your body would never be found. Somebody commented, this one sounds Central or South American. Y'all are all about your femme fatales down there. Story 7. There's an old road on the outskirts of a town called Constitution Drive. It is an unpaved road that leads to an old-looking farmhouse after about a mile down. The legend is that in this house, an entire family of inbred albino people live there, and that they'll murder anyone who gets too close to the house. It's constantly driven on by teenagers smoking weed and stuff, and no one has ever been murdered. This one time I drove down it, however, there were a pair of headlights behind my friends and I, which scared the crap out of us and made us turn around. When we turned around, the other car that was behind us, it was pretty freaky. It's a very narrow road with a cliff on one side and a steep hill on the other, so it's not easy to turn around and disappear. I would hate for the family to be just normal people who have basically been thrown out as outcast. That being said, it's a little weird that people would still go down this road if the only place it led to was that house. My guess is the family wouldn't murder people, just call the cops for trespassing. Story 8. While growing up in my small town in the middle of Illinois, only 1,200 people, we had a family of Italians move in and start a pizza restaurant. I have traveled a lot in my 30 years, and to this day, that pizza was the best pizza I've ever had. Puts all New York pizza to shame. Now, these Italians didn't speak a word of English. Rumor was that when they first opened the store, the local newspaper wanted to write a story about them, and they absolutely refused. Local legend is they are mafia and witness protection. Someone commented, as someone who grew up in a small town in the middle of Illinois, 1,000 people, this interests me greatly because small Midwestern towns just don't have random Italians who make bomb pizza in them. Story 9. There's a road in a wooded area near where I live, and the street is literally called Hairy Man Road. Legend goes that there was a kid who was separated from his family when they were trying to escape some bad weather in the 1800s. He ended up surviving alone in the woods and terrorized people who would come through. Eventually, he was trampled to death by some people on horses passing by that he tried to scare. I forget how weird the name of the road is until I have to say it out loud. There are Hairy Men festivals each year in my town. And the hairiest man legit wins a prize. So weird, LMAO. Somebody commented, lol, I'm giggling at the thought of a hairy man festival. I feel like that's a super odd thing to make a festival over and celebrate, but I'm sure people will look for any occasion to go out and show off their hairy body. And hey, at least they get a prize to go with it. Story 10. There's an old summer camp far into the woods near my town. Every kid that goes there learns the story of Skibo Bates. When the camp first opened, they had a big bonfire for all the kids that night, and some of them started picking on poor young Skibo. He gets shoved and tripped into the fire, which sets his clothes up in flames, and he runs from the beach into the large lake the camp was built near. They never found him that night or recovered his body. The counselors all say if you sneak out of your cabins at night, Skibo will find you and take his revenge. Yes, I know it's BS to scare and keep the young kids in their cabins at night. Story 11. Chapel Hill, Tennessee. The story varies based on who tells it, but I'll tell you the gist. Long ago, when train tracks had to be manually switched, a switch operator was killed by an oncoming train. Legend has it that to this day, you can see him carrying his lantern down the tracks. People have reported it moving through their cars when stopped on the tracks at night. There are videos on YouTube of the light. Chapel Hill is a small town, so the lights from an airplane or lights from cars going X direction don't explain it. Most people around here, if pressed, would tell you they tend to believe it due to so many people experiencing it. This one could be true, but I was thinking a plausible explanation could be that there's a night guard just kind of walking down there each day. People focus more on the light than the actual shadow carrying it. Story 12. Not really a local legend, but the older residents are scared to death of the lake I live on. It's considered two separate lakes, but are hydrologically the same. It's relatively small and separated by a peninsula that's just halfway out into the lake. The one they're afraid of has a steep bank and deepens to 50 feet quickly. The water is an unnatural dark color, almost black, and they absolutely refuse to swim in it. Why they own a home on said lake is beyond me. I don't swim in it not because of the fear, but because the water is absolutely disgusting and has a certain smell. Somebody commented, have the city officials test the water. Story 13. There are all kinds of people in my part of Texas who swear they've seen a chupacabra. I haven't, but I did once see two enormous cougars jump across the road in front of my car, chasing a deer. Looked like house cats, but 8 feet from nose to tail. Someone commented, I've seen two. Small hairless critter the size of a fox or raccoon, but hairless. I always assumed they were just mangy raccoons. Story 14. Last year on Mother's Day, a guy walked into my town's only grocery store carrying a severed head. It was his mom's head, by the way. He stabbed a worker of the store and went absolutely batty. No matter how many people I explain it to, they all think he was from our little podunk town. He wasn't. He walked about 10 to 12 miles to take his mom to the store on Mother's Day. It's kind of been a blessing and a curse, really. Weird hipsters stay away from our town, thinking it is filled with nut jobs, while crazy homeless druggies flock to our town like it's Mecca. Yeah, I think I'd prefer the hipsters to people using drugs, but to each their own, I suppose. I'm really sorry you had to see that though, P. It sounds absolutely terrifying. Story 15. I've lived in several towns, one with populations from 100,000 to 5,000 people. There's always a group of people, usually moderately successful in business, who party hard together. The rest of the town are convinced there's partner swapping or sharing going on at these gatherings. Never have any evidence, and no one's seen it, but I've always heard from a friend of a friend who was at the party, but left when the shenanigans started. Hey, it's probably happening occasionally, but every time? Someone commented, I've had the same experiences, but with Freemasons and Satan-worshipping Satanists being added to the story as the towns get smaller. Story 16. There's an urban legend in my town about a bus full of children in the 70s that went up Gold Camp Road, this narrow dirt incline into the mountains, and went over the side, killing everyone on the bus. Legend has it that if you drive up that road and park your car where the bus went over the side, you'll get little handprints all over your car from the ghost children. It's amazing to me how many locals still believe this story. Somebody commented, I remember my friend doing this and awaiting the handprints. She said they never came. Story 17. There's a rundown mansion outside of the small town I grew up in. Story is, back in the day, The owners had a massive house party, but the second floor collapsed due to the weight and killed several people. The dude who owns it legit lives next to it in a small trailer. The driveway is really long and covered with trees. So we would try to see who could get closest to the house before he noticed and started shooting his rifle in the air. I don't think kids mess with it that much anymore though. Somebody commented if it's that run down, he probably couldn't afford to fix it. And it was cheaper to buy a trailer to live in. I see that with a lot of old properties and always think it's a shame. Yeah, I don't blame the kids who stopped going. I know I sure as hell wouldn't have gone back if I knew someone would start shooting at me all the time if I got too close to his property. Story 18. That our local homeless guy, who's actually pretty famous, was on national TV a couple times, was secretly a millionaire who went crazy when his wife died. Just a dumb story people tell because they think it's cool, even though it's ridiculous. Someone commented, we had a similar story about a local homeless man who would be seen with a ragged old newspaper. The rumor was that it contained a story about his wife and children who had died in a fire. Not sure if it was true or not. Story 19. The Manchester Pusher. Manchester, England is a city with a large downtown canal and river network. There's an urban legend that a serial killer is active who wanders the city's waterways and pushes people into the water and leaves them to drown. According to the local police, there were 28 unexplained deaths in the water between 2008 and 2014. Family members of some of these victims insist that their loved one's death was no accident, even though the police have written off the pusher as an urban legend. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this one was actually true. Maybe I'm cynical, but when a story involves a human being a crappy person, I'm much more inclined to believe than stories about an evil ghost or monster. Story 20. A lot of my classmates believe that our school was an old Cold War-era bunker before being built. My school opened up in 1960, and the only evidence people cite to prove this story is a hatch in the floor of the makeup room for theater kids that no one is allowed to open. Nothing comes up when you search my school about bunkers, so it's safe to say that the legend is not true. Someone commented, you'll never truly know until you open up that hatch. Story 21. We have the Bandage Man. It's basically a story of a guy who either got cut up, fell into a wood chipper, got into a fight with a bear. It really depends on who you ask. And now wanders the woods along the highway covered in bandages. If you are unlucky enough to pull over, he'll get in your car and kill you. I just recently saw a flyer on the bulletin board at the local post office asking for people's stories, so someone can make a mockumentary. See, I firmly believe in instilling goodwill and treating everyone the way you would want to be treated. That being said, you will never catch me pulling over and letting someone into my car that I don't know. I'll call someone for you, but you're not getting in my car. Story 22. I live in a small town in Wisconsin. There's an urban legend my grandparents would tell that supposedly an old crazy farmer had adult relations with a coyote, thus creating a small coyote man-child that now lives in the woods and eats people's pet cats. The legend is totally fictitious, but when I was young, I had a lot of childhood cats go missing, and it always scared me, lol. Someone commented, the cats are probably getting eaten by actual coyotes. They'll nab cats and small dogs easily and frequently. Story 23. Kids would always talk about a bridge called Gibbs Bridge being haunted, and they would go there in middle school to be edgy kids. There are about 1,000 different stories about why it's haunted, but everyone claims they've seen ghosts or heard the pickup truck of the dead guy. I crossed the bridge once. It's barely even a bridge, and it's just over a tiny creek, and it's just full of graffiti and in the middle of the country. Story 24. Some people built a house in our town. It's a waterfront property with a swimming pool for some reason. It's surrounded by a security fence and even has spotlights. People in town refer to the place as Mafia Retreat. I met the people who live there. They're the second owners. Although we don't know much about the original owners, the people who live there currently have officially renamed it to Mafia Treat. Either they're actually part of the mafia or they're secret geniuses who figured out the best way to keep people off of their property. I mean, who would go somewhere named Mafia Retreat? So if that's the truth, I have to tip my hat off for their genius. Story 25. There is this old abandoned underway of this bridge that is supposedly haunted, and if you walk too far in it, you'll be cursed. So no one did it for the longest time, until some guys at my high school finished the walk. And all it is now is people smoking weed. I don't think it was ever haunted. I just come from a very gullible town, etc. Story 26. There's a railroad crossing in downtown San Antonio where supposedly some kids were killed. If you dust your deck lid with flour and park your car on the tracks, the ghosts of the kids will push your car off the tracks, and you'll see their handprints on the car. Somebody commented, and if that doesn't work, you can get hit by a train and start the cycle again. Story 27. There's a rural road just outside of town that people say is haunted. One time, some friends and I drove over there, and we were driving real slow, kind of just giggling and crap, and a cop pulled us over and told us to leave. I think a lot of teens just go there to smoke and crap. That cop is probably just sick of stupid kids who keep messing up his nightly naps on that stretch of road. So maybe it's not haunted in the literal sense, so much as you're confirmed you're always gonna get pulled over. Story 28. There is this pockmarked ghoul who lives in the woods in my neighborhood. Some believe he preys on teen girls. Most of the time, though, he drinks alone in his tent, screaming racist profanities, sometimes until 4 a.m. We don't know what to do about it. Story 29. The Bragg Lights. A railroad worker was holding a lantern, fell and hit his head, got run over and decapitated. Now you see his lights as he looks for his head. Except there are no records anywhere of such an incident anywhere near here. Hey, maybe this is the same place from that other story. If not, then it's definitely interesting how incredibly similar stories can be, told in many different parts of the world. Story 30. The Hoop Snake. Indigenous to the Mississippi in the Minnesota and Wisconsin area. It's a snake that bites its tail and chases you like a hula hoop. Somebody commented, that visual is weirdly funny, to be honest. Story 31. My university's legend says that whoever eats from the mulberry tree growing behind the linguistics building shall never graduate, and if they graduate, they shall pursue academic careers and never leave the university. Story 32. The assassination of President William McKinley at the Pan Am Expo in 1903 cursed the region and led to the Buffalo Bills losing 4 Super Bowls in a row and the 1999 Stanley Cup no goal. Well, that sounds like the perfect explanation the team could use if they ever lost anything. Not to be mean to that team or any of their fans, but that is a pretty funny logic that it was cursed because of the assassination. I feel like so many other places could use that as an excuse though, so I don't really think it stands up too well. Story 33. I live about half a mile from a house where a guy killed his parents with a hatchet. When I give locals directions to my house, they say, oh yeah, turn where the axe murders were. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.